one of the reasons I do believe that this moment is different is because I feel that there are people that are involved now that were never involved before. And now the impact is being felt in a way that no one has ever really seen. There's a crossover element to it. The one thing that we've learned over the past decade, since we first became aware of each other during, obviously you were with Jimmy, I was with, working on the sidelines with Jordan. And I think we've seen this sort of evolving, if you will, of the way that the political discourse happens. We found ourselves kind of in a bubble, thinking that we're well aware of what's going on, but the overwhelming majority of people are not really aware of what's going on. And when you bring up that particular issue at the time, let's say Medicare for all, for example, most people look at you cross-eyed. They don't know what you're talking about. And they're like, oh, that sounds good. And I don't really know too much. I do believe we have crossed a threshold that is different. I believe it's different now. And the reason I believe it's different is because of people like Miss Rachel.
Be so ashamed of your silence. Be so ashamed that you've seen the same images and videos that we've all seen, but they haven't moved you to do the right thing. The doctor who had her 9 children come to her, who had been killed. You saw the little girl walking through the fire. You could see her little ponytail. Be so ashamed that you normally speak out for human rights. You normally speak out for children everywhere, but you won't now because they're Palestinian. Be so ashamed of your anti-Palestinian racism.
We've talked about this before. I think that the use of the word racism is extremely overblown in many instances. I think the fear of the unknown is a real thing for sure, but there could be no clear-cut example of pure, unadulterated racism in its purest form than the way Zionists feel about Palestinians. Ethnic, cultural, religious superiority, pure and simple. And then you have the people who just stay silent for whatever reason that may be, either because they hold certain internal bigotry regarding people that are Palestinian. If there was one thing we could all definitely agree on, is that there is no overstating how absolutely bigoted this country is when it comes to Muslims.
Oh, yeah.
That's real.
Oh, I think, yeah, absolutely. And also just how nationalistic this country is. I mean, I've said this before. I'll say it again. I don't know if the United States is the most nationalistic country in the world because I've not traveled enough to be able to make that qualified statement. I will say this. If there is a country more nationalistic than the U.S., I've not been there, and I have no desire to go there. If such a place exists, I have no desire to go there. I don't care how pretty their beaches are or whatever else. I have no desire to go there if such a country even exists and they have nice beaches. But yeah, so I think that's kind of what people lean on. They lean on like, well, you don't question our foreign policy. Whatever we're doing is the right way to do it. So if we're helping out Israel, Israel is the right side, and that's who you should be rooting for. And it is no more complicated than that. There's a good guy and a bad guy, and life is a comic book. And by the way, they're the sanitized comic books that we've required the U.S. to have since the 1950s. You can look that up. That was a big effort to kind of like make people obedient for war back in the day in this country, and that's what they lean on. And I think people, especially in the political realm, I mean, there's been a very, very small handful of outspoken people. And even that has left a bit to be desired, I would say. And it's absolutely criminal, but it's par for the course, because I mean, a lot of these politicians, they get AIPAC money. A lot of them just, don't ask questions about foreign policy, or just choose to have a blind ignorance because it's best for their job security if they do that. And that is the system. That's what's happened. That's what happens when you build a war economy.
I'm not going to say who it is, but Jen was, let's just say, friendly, if not outright, colleague-esque, if you will, with a congressman who is there now. And I actually think is a fairly decent one, to be honest. But even that person made a statement about the anti-Semitism bullshit. And it's like, they all get their mind right. They all do. There's very few, if any, like, again, Thomas Massie is a rare bird who just doesn't care. He understands his worth. He knows his constituents better than anybody else. He knows he's safe, and he's willing to say what needs to be said. And when we see people that we even for a second think are decent, and then
how are his votes though? That's my only, and not even, I'm not even like singling him out, but my question in general, when I hear stuff like that, when you hear like some of these, people who they have a hyper online audience, so they can kind of be, they can kind of make statements like that easier and not lose their support. My question does come back to, how do they vote? Because tweets don't equal policy.
Yeah, and no, I think that the fairest way to describe Thomas Massie, who I do believe is as good as anybody in the halls of Congress, he's obviously libertarian. He's as pretty much as anti-war as it gets. Are
his votes that way?
1,000% across the board.
Okay,
when it comes to the
I'll take your word for it. I can't speak to that.
When it comes to the military-industrial complex, there is nobody better. Nobody. Period. He's the best, and he's willing to buck that trend. And he's voted against every defense budget, every single one. He's voted against it. He's willing to be that one no vote. And then, of course, you have the Donald who comes along and says what a terrible person Thomas Massie is. And everyone in the MAGA movement, to a man, says, back the fuck off of Thomas Massie. So it's going to be interesting to see what sort of like the post-Trump world is going to look like. I don't want to look that far into the future right now, because we've got way too many problems that we're dealing with that right now, and that we're obviously going to have to deal with him going forward.
Yeah, but it's a long ways away. So.
It is. But this is inspiring, because Miss Rachel is somebody who doesn't get involved with this stuff ever. She made a very gentle comment regarding the genocide and how the Palestinian children have a right to live. Well, let me tell you something, brother. They came after her with guns blazing. Little did they know how influential this woman is, and it has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with the fact that she is Miss Sesame Street. That's basically who she is. Like, this is the lady that is like who Mr. Rogers was for us in the 80s when we were little kids. That's basically who she is. And they're coming after her. And it's like the Zionists, they don't know the meaning of going too far. And so now it's essentially that, at least from her disposition, that, okay, now I'm going to make it a crusade. And that's what this looks like to me.
So ashamed that you don't see Palestinian people or their children as the same as us and our children. You think their babies don't like peekaboo and don't smile when they see someone they love and don't cry the same? Be so ashamed that your constituents are begging and pleading for you to say something and do something, and you just ignore us. Be so ashamed that you're putting money, power, your career, your reputation before precious children of God. Be so ashamed that our religions tell us to help the poor. Our religions tell us to feed the hungry. Our religions tell us to open our arms to all people and all children and love every neighbor as ourselves. And you pretend that they mean some. You pretend that they mean ones that maybe look like you or have been deemed acceptable. And that's not right. That's a lie. When enough people say something, it's not controversial anymore. So we need everyone to say something. It's never been wrong to say not to starve children and not to bomb children and not to kill 15,000 children. What's wrong is to be silent.
Amen.
Yeah, well
it
said.
Could not
Good
be
for her.
any more clear.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and when you come at it from like a humanitarian point of view, it's really hard to dispute that. You know what I mean? Like when you come at it from, it's just like, hey, bombing children, very bad, very, very bad. It's really, really hard. I mean, they try, but it's not easy.
I wouldn't normally look for any Bible quotes, but they still call me Ricky. Suffer the children unto me, not make the children suffer. That is, couldn't say it better. That's exactly what it is. But what we have learned over the years, and of course, obviously you're from Pittsburgh, I'm from New Jersey.
Yeah,
We
Pittsburgh is the home of Mr. Rogers, by the way.
Mhm.
He broadcasts right next to my high school.
I mean, talk about a legend, to say the least.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and he was one of those guys too. I mean, he looked at things. I mean, his actual politics were like on the right contemporarily. Like he typically voted Republican and stuff, but he was also just like a human about things, and he was very much just a humanitarian. So yeah, I feel like he would be, if he was still alive, he'd be saying similar things right now. And
well,
I doubt he'd be voting Republican. But
I doubt he'd be voting Democrat either.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's tough to say because it's like, sometimes it's like people, vote a certain way because this is just what the system hands them. But yeah, yeah, I think he'd be saying similar things to what she just said if he was still around.